is the ref not calling it right there? That's ridiculous. So he just gets over the hips there. Here come the punches. He knows he's got to cover up, yeah. Hey, my name is Jay Ferrari. I've been training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for more than 20 years, and today we're going to watch some top MMA submissions. There's his head coming out. There it is, right there. He comes over the arm there. Okay, cool. Yeah. Just owning his head and neck right there. That was really nice. He put that post arm out, and he came out from under the arm, and then he went behind the arm, then he went over the neck. Just nice, tight, mata-leão, rear naked choke. What was interesting is that he didn't have, belly down back mount, so to speak. He was off to the side. Typically, when you're in a scenario like that, when that choke works really well, you have full back mount on your opponent. They're laying belly down on the mat. You're above them with hooks in, hip pressure, and you peel their head up and you fire that choke in right around their neck. Try to get the point of your elbow in line with their chin. You grab your bicep, get on the back of their head, squeeze and puff your chest. Lights out. The fighter on the bottom still had his base, but the guy on top was being super patient and saw him expose. He exposed his head. His head was off. He picked his head up, and he opened up his arm with an arm post, and he was able to find that pocket. And then what was really smart about how he finished that choke, it's kind of counterintuitive. When you get control like that, and especially when people are first starting to learn submissions, they think everything kind of happens in the extremities, in the arms. Like, you're going to get this choke on, and then I'm going to pull as hard as I can, and you pull back. And actually, that creates space. I mean, it can be really miserable and create a lot of torque and be an awful submission. But what you saw the fighter on the top do really, really well is he got the choke in, and then he kind of curled everything in. He brought his head to the other guy's head, used his own head to seal off the other fighter's movement. So he had him kind of blocked on all sides. He had the arms in place. He had his head down. He was driving. And again, you're sealing the carotid arteries with the frames of your arms. And I think that the other fighter knew that had happened. He was bummed out. He knew he'd kind of slipped up and gave him that opportunity to get that connection in and finish the sub. But it was really well done.
Got the arm triangle.
Oh! That kick was nice. That was dangerous, him going in on that, but he was smart about it. So we'll watch out. Okay. There we go, head and arm. I love head and arms. And he just closes right away, which is just, that's an instinct that you can't coach, I don't think.
He's got to watch the arm triangle here.
Take your time, he's got to pass that half guard. There we go. There it is, nice. Nice, it's one of my favorite subs. That's a great sub.
Is there something Olivier could have done better to try to evade the choke?
At that point, I think he was doing the best he could. You're on your back. You have no place to go when you're laying on your back. That's the beautiful part of ground fighting, is you take out an entire dimension of retreat. He might have been able to try and swim his hips away and bring an opposite leg to his hip to create some separation in space. That's a big ask, because that choke came on and it looked like it was already pretty tight right from the initial application. It's really hard when that's dialed in like that.
Oh, man. Man, looked like they were going to go down for a moment. Oh, my God, this may not matter. She has got that tight. And she is...
I love watching the female fighters because they tend to be so technique driven. Nice.
Man, looked like they were going to go down for a moment. I mean, this is...
She knows she's in a ton of trouble there. Can't even throw punches.
I'm not stepping around my left leg trying to trip her back.
Wow. Nice, super cool clip. There's a physical disparity between women and men, and women are humble enough to acknowledge that and know that they have to pursue really good execution and technique. Whereas, men start training and they're like, oh, I got it, and they try to muscle everything, and that can work, but female fighters tend to have fantastic execution. And this was a great example of patience too. She had it locked up. The fight at that point for her is to maintain the connection of that triangle and fine tune it and be super patient. If she just stood there and really tried to squeeze and get the finish right away, she probably would have gassed herself out, and then the other fighter would have gotten out of that situation. But she was super patient, kept her feet, and just you can see her kind of slowly, slowly tightening up. She doesn't come in and try to lay it on her at 100%. She's got it knit, and then slowly, steadily building the pressure up, building the connection and tension, and then other fighters out on her feet. That's a real cool one. Another nice head and arm triangle.
I mean, do you think maybe she gave up too easily?
No, 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 she did not. When you're not getting blood flow to your brain, your cognitive abilities are shot. She's not deciding to give up. She's basically feeling the lights go out. You could see her reaching back and trying to get some tension out of the knot just so she could survive. When her intention went from, I'm gonna start counterfighting and I could throw punches into her ribs, to, this is happening, and she reaches up and tries to kind of loosen that knot, that's not something she's deciding to do. That's her lizard brain taking over, saying, we're dying right now and we need to do everything we can do to survive. So she did not give up. She had an excellent submission put on her, and it was, she did her best to gut it out. I mean, super, super noble effort. To really choke somebody and maintain control, what you're trying to do is get under one arm and over another. You can do this with legs too. There's leg triangles, but we say you need one arm in and one arm out. If you just try to choke somebody on their neck, they're more than likely going to find either a gap where they can survive or be able to slip out of it. These are blood chokes. They're not air chokes. And blood chokes are far more powerful because you're cutting off blood flow to the brain. You can endure an air choke for as long as you can hold your breath. Some people can hold their breath for 2 minutes or more, which is, that's a long time. But if you can shut off blood flow to the brain by sealing the carotid arteries, then 5, 6 seconds, maybe a little longer, but you're out. So this choke, you step in, and what you're trying to do is get basically the other person's deltoid impinged by your arm, and you're driving that into this side of their neck. And then you're using your arm on the other side of their neck, and this muscle mass here is going into the carotid cavities on either side of the neck. Boom. Seals that off, you tighten it up, you puff your chest, pinch your elbows, bring your head and get everything nice and tight, half a dozen seconds, and it's bedtime.
Finishes Cola Esparza at the Mecca.
We'll be able to choke her here, but now she's going to... Now she's got it.
Nice. Another great RNC, rear naked choke. A great example of patience. She brought the other fighter over with like a crucifix, a kind of sweep where she had one arm, one of her opponent's arms entangled in her legs. So anytime you can isolate limbs, you're taking that out of the fight, which is a really smart thing to do. So she had that arm out of the fight, and she swept her over, and she put in kind of 2/3 of the choke in place by getting an arm around the neck. But the fighter who was in trouble knew that she had to control that other fighter's arm, because if she could bring that other arm in, she'd finish the choke. So really the whole fight there at that moment was about who was going to be able to control that far arm. The fighter with control was being super patient, was not in a hurry. If she had hurried, if she had tried to reach real quick and finish that sub, the other fighter probably would have gotten out. It would have been a scramble. She knew what she needed, and she knew that the odds were obviously in her favor and tilting continuously further towards her favor. So she was just being patient, hanging out, doing that hand fighting. She pummeled around. And what was really smart, and again, this is a great example of how you see, female fighters just really being so technique driven, is she didn't bring her arm in front to connect to the bicep and then come around to finish, because if she had done that, the other fighter probably would have caught her hand, recaptured it, and then we would have been back to that fight. But when she freed her hand, she brought her hand real tight inside to knit it up, so it was never exposed in the first place. We call that defending the defense. That only happens when you have tremendous control and composure. So it was a great example of both. Nice choke, nice finish.
Here. Oh, Luke is about to lock his hands.
Oh my goodness, Tyron's
He's just out on his feet. We should have called it right there. Why is the ref not calling it right there? That's ridiculous. Absolutely huge. Oh, big knee. Luke Wade just has him against the cage. He closes with strikes. You got to give Woodley credit. He's still in there. He's on automatic pilot, but he's still, he's still slinging. He's still throwing kicks. He's just on automatic pilot there. He tried to go for a takedown. He really just fell, kind of crumbled down, looking for a takedown there. Or some kind of leg control. Here comes the Darce. Awesome.
Yep, he's going Darce.
Can't move because he's trapped up against the cage.
Oh, that's a horrible place to be. Oh, man. So that was a Darce choke to finish that fight. I think that fight should have been called before that choke was applied, because you could see Woodley was out on his feet. He was walking like he was drunk. That one moment where he stumbles from one side of the cage to the other. His knees were gone. I got to give Woodley credit for just having really great baked-in reflexes, because he kept fighting even though he was checked out. And even when he was on the ground with that choke in, he was trying to fight out of that choke. But again, just too powerful. And again, great example of patience by Luque there, where he knew he had, once the sub is built, some of the things I've always been taught, and it's a great thing to keep in mind is, once something is built, you hang on to it. You hopefully never abandon a sub. You've got something knit, you've got an arm bar. If you know it's tight and it has the potential is there. What I don't want to do is go through all the trouble of building something and this guy's getting squirrely and then, I'm going to let him go and then I'm look for something else. The fight is about maintaining the control. One of the things we like to say is, if you fight for the sub, you lose control. But if you fight for control, you get the sub. So he had the darts knitted. It might not have been choking him out just yet, but he was super patient, kept just kind of improving and improving and improving, tightening up, and out he went.
Look at this, he's under the 10! And he's got one arm in play. Oh my goodness.
We're going to get back mount, triangle mount.
Oh my God, he's got it!
Nope. Nope, that's it. Nice. So another great example of a rear naked choke. This one from a cool back mount position where it's a back body lock triangle. If you see the clip, Moreno has his legs around his opponent's waist. He has one leg, basically across his midsection and the other leg hooked over that. So he has his legs triangled around the other fighter's torso, which is that in and of itself. People who can do that can be miserable because usually your connection is above the hip line. If you can keep it on your hips, they can squeeze your hips all day, but that's not going to bother you because that's bone and you can gut that out and start to turn and try to turn into your opponent and battle back out. But people who apply it well, they get above your hip line and right below your floating ribs, so they're squeezing your diaphragm and you can't breathe in the first place. So already that other fighter was probably really struggling just to breathe. And he had the RNC set, but the other fighter had it, was kind of inhibiting it. He had his arm across and he's trying to kind of keep him from connecting the knot. And so Moreno's just like, give me that damn arm. And he just starts hammering him in the face. So he, softens him up. Then he's able to sink that choke deeper and then puts it in. I mean, these guys amaze me because when you feel the pressure of those submissions from a capable fighter, it just feels like you're in a cement mixer or trash compactor. It's just crushing. It's like that scene in Star Wars. It's everything, just smushing you. And you train day in and day out, and you're like, oh yeah, you got it, man, nice work, and you tap right away. But these guys, they're looking to get paid. They don't want to admit defeat, so their pain tolerance and their, their fighting spirit is really high. They're not gonna tap unless there's absolutely no other option. So you just know, when these subs are applied, they're applied at 100 times the intensity of anything you even feel when you're in a practice session. Like they want it. They're signing that check, and more power to them. But that had to just be an awful place to be. That was really well done. That was pretty.
Interesting decision there from Błachowicz.
There's the mount, full mount. That's just the worst place. There it is, hooks in. That's what we're talking about. Hip pressure. Beautiful. Yeah, great technique and execution on that fight. That's a classic example of belly down back mount. He had kind of half guard, top mount, and he's trying to work his way in with the strikes. He was throwing knees. He was keeping his hips nice and high and driving pressure down, kind of like doing a dive bomber push-up. He had him basically between the mat and the cage, so he's got nowhere to go. But he had his pressure down, applied down to keep him there. If he'd have kind of backed out, he would have given that other fighter an opportunity to sit up and maybe fight back. So he knew the first thing he had to do was basically keep him pinned right in the crosshairs like that. And then he, again, good patience. He worked his way up past the legs, and he gets to mount and, gets the other guy to go belly down. I don't know if he did that intuitively or was to avoid the strikes. He's coming, so he just gets over the hips there. Here come the punches. He knows he's got to cover up. Yeah, he's trying to just protect himself, keep his head, and then he starts throwing those hooks into the face. You can't help it. You pick your head up, or you get your head lifted up, and then he threads that arm, boom. And then when he has the back mount, he's giving good hip pressure, and he's kind of skydiving in with his hips. He's got his hooks in the guy's legs, so he can't get his feet under him at all. You can't build a base back up after that. Like nobody can fight laid flat out on their belly or on their back. So what you have to try and do is get your knees back under you again. You want to build a base up at least to start working your way out. But if you can't even do that. You know, he had brought his hands in and he was thinking, you know, instinctively you can't help but try and protect yourself. Those punches start coming in, then that hand gets laced under the chin. And in this scenario, what was cool is you don't have to get that full build where you really tie into the bicep. You could, but all he needed was that palm to palm connection, and you can squeeze that in, sink your hips, tons of pressure. The pressure's coming from the body there, right? Like if you think about it, the arms, you know, are not where the pressure application really is. It can be tight, it can be, you know, heavy, but then it's the power of the whole body engaged into applying force to that move. It just makes it, you know, so powerful. That's awesome.
So it seemed like a huge error for Blachowicz to turn over given his back.
Yeah.
What do you think he was trying to do there?
You know, yes, at that point, if he had you know, tried to bring both arms in and turn his hips toward the cage and just, you know, keep his frames in place, that might have been a survivable moment. What's interesting here, if you look at the picture, Glover has his head down and kind of in his armpit to keep him from bringing that other arm back in to protect himself too. He's using his head post really effectively. So he's kind of inhibiting him from making that turn so he can get, you know, stay on his back and bring his arms in. Well, that's the only way he could go. He couldn't go back into the cage. His only way out is to go forward, but forward, unfortunately, is also belly down because he's being controlled by Glover, and, you know, then it's all over.
Yeah, now it's tight. Now he's in trouble. He's gonna go to sleep. Bars, Jim.
Oh, this guy's crazy. There it is. So, you know, when you've got somebody on your back, you know, for obvious reasons, that's the worst place to have an opponent behind you because you have nothing to protect yourself. At that point, again, you're in survival mode. Sticking with him. Oh, he fought out, but then you just replace with the other one. He's out with his eyes open. Yep. Nice. Yeah, another great example of a rear naked choke application. Looked like at the end of the clip, you can see how he got him down to the mat. He did kind of a nice mat return, back body lock, picked him up, took him right to the mat. And so he's got the choke laced in. Initially, he's being real patient, keeping his head tight. And the guy on the bottom, again, super game. He's like, he can still, I think he was even winking at the ref. He's like, I'm okay. Because he found, you know, you can find that little sliver of survivability a lot of times in the frame. You're obviously being restrained, but you are still getting you're still getting blood flow to your brain, and you know that. And he has his hands up. Maybe he's going to try and maybe start throwing some punches over his shoulder and try to hit him in the face or attack the grip. But you can see, like, he can't kind of make his hands work. And this is, you know, really a beautiful example of fighting to maintain control versus fighting the sub. So that one arm dissolves, but right away he comes right in and just rebuilds that sub on the other side. He knows he's got the fantastic control position. He's got both hooks in for back mount. He's super tight. He's got the neck contained. So kind of your mindset in that point is, I'm around his neck. I've got this loop built. If you want to strip that away, oh, okay, that's fine. I'll just come in with it. I'll just follow it and build it on the other side. And then it's almost always worse when a sub like that gets rebuilt. It just comes in tighter because there's that moment where that's on you and you clear it and you're like, oh, cool, I'm safe. And you're kind of taking a moment just to celebrate the fact that you're going to live for another microsecond, and then boom, before you can even get that thought out of your head, the other arm's coming in twice as tight, really under the chin. He's out with his eyes open on that. You just, boom, gone. Nice one.
Yeah, you talked a little bit about it, but how do you try to get out?
Don't be there in the first place is the best wisdom. It depends on the depth of the submission. I mean, if you've got one arm around your neck, you know, you've got to bring hands up, you got to turn your hips, try to square your shoulders to the back, try to fight your head to the other side of your opponent's head, and get your head to the mat, heavy head on the mat, so that they can't bring that other arm and make the connection. If the connection's already there, you know, again, you have to think about where can you move. You obviously cannot move your head and shoulders because they're, encircled by this guy's arms. So maybe you can put some torque into your hips and start trying to get outside of his hooks. Again, you're in really like Hail Mary territory here. The best defense is not having let that get built in the first place. Like if you're on your back and suddenly here comes this arm, you got to start trying to catch it and inhibit it, and get some grips on the forearm with claw fingers and just take the tension out of it and try to fight under it, or fight your head to the mat on the other side. Once it's built, you're trying to just keep, find anything you can do to keep that constriction from improving. And even if theoretically you are able to do that for a few seconds and weather that choke and realign yourself, that costs you so much physically. Maybe you survive that and you come out, but then, he's still going to have back mount, or he's going to come up to full mount on top and then just start laying in on you again. That takes so much out of you. That really takes the life out of you.
What is your opinion on not tapping?
I don't know. It's a personal choice. I mean, that's, you got to be prepared for the consequences with that. I know that there's, especially with these guys who train at a high level, they'll fight the tap to the bitter end. A lot of times with these subs, they're put on so tightly and with such force and authority that I don't think you're making a decision at that point. You're not in a, that last fighter was not in a place where he's like, oh, I guess this choke is on. All right, I'll tap. That was reflexive. And those are the best kind of taps when you're, you lay something on somebody with such authority and conviction. They don't decide to tap. They're just like, yeah, they're not taking a moment to process whether or not they can get out. They're done. Well, we watched some fantastic submissions, chokes, head and arm triangles, and rear naked chokes. If you happen to find yourself in one of these scenarios, maybe ask yourself what you did to get there in the first place and avoid that in the future. Just remember that your fight becomes about improving that submission. So be patient, make micro adjustments, as is the popular term. Fight to maintain control. Let the submission kind of take care of itself. Keep going to it, let it build itself, and stay tight. Apply that pressure. Should work out for you.